are from 7,000 publishers around the world. And with the enriched data in such a model, you can see or you can find what researches has been done, or where those research has been taken place, or what the impact or you can find what researches. And with all those data or information, our mission is really to help the world of research make high-value decisions with confidence. And in order to do that, we believe that you or we also need the curated, comprehensive content that you can trust. And then with this, actually, we have an independent content selection and advisory board, CSAB in short, to select and curate the content we have. Some of you may know that this board has 17 different subject chairs who are experts in different fields, and they make decisions about which journals should be included. They use a set of quantitative and qualitative selection criteria to review each and every title suggested. And currently, actually, the overall acceptance rate is less than 50%. But from Ulrich Web Global Series Directory, you know that there are more than 100,000 scholarly journals out there, and currently Scopus covers about 25,000. And this means Scopus or a CSAB select those journals that are only relevant to be included, because those journals provide content according to the international publishing standards, and the content quality is high enough and relevant for the international audience. So Scopus is really committed to creating a representative curated database of scholarly content. Well, we do that on a journal level, or in other words, based on the journal performance. So we not only select those journals, we also monitor the journals that is already indexed in the databases, and make sure that those that are predatory or with low standards are taken out. But kindly note that Scopus does not interfere with editorial authority. And these include the editorial decisions of the quality of individual work, or publication malpractice like plagiarism, author dispute, data manipulation, again, on individual article level. And only those malpractices are occurringly known on a structural basis, and without any policies, journal policies to address them, Scopus will flag, reevaluate, and potentially discontinue those titles. Okay, as a good introduction. So we've mentioned about publication malpractice, or that is definitely in the title or topic of today's content. And now I would like to dive into the details and the context of this issue, because you will see that this is not a binary or a black or white issue. So first of all, the term predatory journal is not new. Some of you may know that there are various studies indicating predatory journals are on the rise, but actually it's nearly impossible to determine the exact size. The term itself was coined by Jeffrey Beall, a librarian from University of Colorado, Denver in 2010, 10 years ago. And back then, Beall works with a binary classification, so in which a journal is considered either predatory or not. It is not, but the decision Beall made was not sort of systematically explained, and it's not possible to make a more detailed quantification of what we call predatoriness of those journals. And later on, Beall's list website ceased to be maintained by himself in early 2017. So that's about 4 years ago, due to much of the criticism or various reasons. And since then, the discussion hasn't stopped, but continued in different parties or organizations. And one important research group we would like to mention is a research group from Canada who reached a consensus definition of predatory publishing. And if you're interested, I would really encourage everyone to read the full publication of that paper, which is listed on the slide. And one important statement about the definition is the predatory journals or publishers are entities that prioritize self-interest at the expense of scholarship. This is also a key aspect. Scopus and subject chairs review and identify potential bad journals and decide to delist. And an important question worth asking is why this happens, right? Why predatory journals exist and highly possible will exist for a long time. Well, first and foremost, in the enormous pressure to publish and publish fast, or what we call publish or perish term. So it's a key driving force for this, for sure. And then the new technologies such as easy to set up website, spamming emails, or easy to pay the article publishing charges, etc. And then some of the misuse of the open access models. The misuse of the open access model is that, there are incentives for those journals to publish as many papers as possible because, basically the more they publish, the higher revenue they will generate. And last but not least, some researchers, and especially or possibly young researchers, may lack the knowledge of journal publishing and may fall into this or suspicious titles more easily. So, and what Scopus does to address this issue? So first and foremost, again, Scopus, together with our CSAB, Content Selection Advisory Board, takes its responsibility of curating the content on an ongoing basis, and would continue to develop new approaches as a defense against the low quality or predatory journals. I want to explain a bit further, like actually low quality journals is not exactly the same as the predatory journals, as low quality might be that those journals have a lower than average performance, especially the matrix or citation performance in that specific field. But it may also be that those journals only serves a very niche research community, which means that fewer people work in this, and it is sort of natural that fewer people would cite the works published there, and even the self-citation may get a bit higher than average. But still, those journals are relevant to be included in Scopus and are genuine journals in serving the niche, well, the research area, although niche, as an important information sources or research sources there. But then on the other hand, so for this, for the predatory ones, we do consider that it is necessary to exclude certain ones, and we have been addressing this issue for some years now. And but also on the other hand, really note that validating those concerns or take a well-informed decision is complex. As I said, it's never binary. It needs to take several parameters into account. And then there are also risks actually to discontinue the genuine journals, and so specific evidence on the publication malpractices of those journals is definitely needed. And the more solid the evidence were provided, and the speed to decide on the discontinue or continuing with the journal will be faster. Okay, Scopus has a rigorous mechanism to address this, and there are 4 ways how journals are being identified. And basically, all the 25,000 journals in Scopus are monitored on an ongoing basis. And for the 4 ways we are identifying those journals, first is based on our own observation or direct feedbacks from the users. So these publication concerns will be validated, and if validated, we will send those journals to reevaluation. And secondly, it's about it's more on the poor performance journals or poor underperforming journals. So we're looking at the matrix and the benchmarks of mainly the citation impact or the self-citations of those journals, and identify really those at the bottom and sending them to reevaluation. But we allow about 2 years or seeing the 2 years of matrix for those journals and picking those that are most relevant. And the third one is using a tool called Radar to pick the outlier performance journals. And outlier means that journal may have abnormal or exponentially growing publication output, or a sudden change in the citation behavior or the author affiliations change. So those are especially efficient and helpful in identifying the potentially predatory journals. And lastly, during CSAB review, they can indicate whether any accepted titles should be evaluated again in the future. And so this has been done for quite some years, and those data are collected and analyzed, and especially last year, we sent a batch of titles to evaluation and making sure that those journals are continuously monitored. Okay, so we're living in a dynamic world, so do journals, right? And journal may change over time. For example, their editorial policy, the governance entities, or in other words, editorial boards, editors, or even publishers working behind it. So a journal may well start and select for coverage for a good reason. Well, with the change in policy, it may not be applicable anymore for inclusion. And thus, a continuous ongoing reevaluation mechanism is really needed. And that is to make sure that predatory content will be prevented or stopped from going to Scopus. And here is a split of titles evaluated and discontinued during the past 5 years. That's during 2016 to 2020. And you can see here that almost 1,000 titles were reevaluated, and you can find a detailed number of each reason of identification and the number of titles discontinued. And so you can see that the discontinued numbers is highlighted in orange and the continued ones is in gray. And I'm showing the details and just wishing to say really that, you can see that the largest bulk come from the publication concerns, and the catch rate is relatively high on that. But still, that there are journals that maybe decided to continue the coverage after CSAB review, and they consider that the content there is still relevant and worth covering in Scopus. Okay, and then what happens with the journals for which we decided to discontinue that? And first of all, no new content will be added to Scopus, and those new content including the back files. And then the content already indexed remains as a matter of scientific record, and so that will not be removed, in the other words, and this is to ensure stability and consistency of research trend analytics. And actually, there's another reason that not all articles published in those discontinued journals are bad content. there are genuine research published, especially before the journal have gone predatory or performed poorly. But still, in very rare or exceptional cases of the proven very severe unethical publication practices, content already indexed in Scopus may be removed. And all discontinued titles are clearly listed on the link below. And currently, this list is updated monthly. So I would encourage all, if you do care that no articles, you don't want your work to be published in any of the journals listed here, do download that before you make your final choice. Yeah, and I would like to sort of give a quick summary using two quotes from our guardians or the subject chairs. One from Professor Yorksack, who's the chair of CSIB and also the subject chair for computer sciences. And from him or from them, you may also sense a bit of the complexity of this issue and how and why we are addressing that in this way. So from Professor Sack, that is, whether or not a journal is predatory is not a binary decision. So there is a broad spectrum of predatory journal behaviors. And to assess whether a journal should be considered predatory, a number of parameters need to be considered, often in combination. And then another one from Professor Peter Brimmelkom, who is the subject chair for environmental sciences, saying that it is clearly important to remove journals that are predatory or adopt poor publishing practices from Scopus database. But it is less clear what to do with the earlier content in the database, particularly as it may have arisen in periods when the journal was well managed and represent output from well-conducted research. Okay. And I will use the next 10 minutes or so to show about how Indonesia is doing with regard to the research publication output, and especially how publications in those discontinued journals compare to the overall research output. That may give you a bit of the sense how we see this and how things are going on here. So first, this is a research output or publications for Indonesia comparing to other countries like Malaysia, Thailand, South Korea, India, and Russia. And we can see clearly that Indonesia is really a fast-growing country in publication numbers with regards to articles, reviews, and conference papers, Scopus covers. And the growth became very, well, I call it obvious since the 2015 onwards. And the countries with the similar growing rate is Russia and India. And then we see the output in the Content 1, the Q1 journal content by SciScore for Indonesia researchers. And I have to say that it is a bit unfortunate to see here that the Indonesia percentile declines from a bit over 35% publications in Content 1 journals now to a bit over 10%. While the other countries mainly remain stable. And then when you look at the percentage of articles published in the discontinued sources compared to the total output, the data shows the percentage reached a peak. Here is the red line. In 2014, even exceeding 20%. And then has been decreasing since then. And now with last year, especially decreasing below 10%. So that is definitely a good sign. And the countries having similar trend or sort of, I think Malaysia or currently fall into the similar level is should be Malaysia and India. And you can also see that Russia or South Korea or Thailand have an even a lower percentage. I think that's below 2% or 1.5%. So you can see about on what scale those journals will show, or how authors choose to publish in different journals. And then lastly, you may think whether there are certain patterns in subject areas of those papers in discontinued journals. And you can see clearly from this chart that the answer is definitely no. You can see clearly that about 27,000 documents in total from the discontinued journals spread across all subject areas and disciplines. And with the context and driving force I just mentioned, you may agree that the publication malpractice is really a threat to all scientific community. And genuine journals are working hard to avoid bad content from getting published. And it is also fair to say hardly no indexing or an abstract databases could be immune to it. And for example, if we look at or comparing with Web of Science using the public available sources, because both Web of Science and Scopus disclose its source list. So we can see that there are a higher number of journals covered by Scopus and then the Web of Science core collections. So which the Web of Science core collections include the full data sets listed here at around 21,000 titles. And the overlap with Scopus is about 99% for SCIE, SSCI, and AHCI, and around 60% for the ESCI. And Scopus has about 25,000 active titles, but the total number of titles is more than that. Is currently more than 40,000 already. And this analysis is using both active and inactive titles compared, because all the Web of Science numbers include both the active and inactive titles. And I would like to say that of the 40% of ESCI titles Scopus not yet covered, about 1,500 were considered for Scopus coverage or were sent to review. And of those, the titles reviewed by CSAB, about 40% got rejected and didn't have the chance to be included in Scopus. And these titles do not meet the quality standard for Scopus coverage. Well, they are still covered in Web of Science ESCI. And then if you look at the discontinued titles, about 60 of them are still included in their core collections or the journals with an impact factor. And another 40 still actively included in the ESCI. And really kindly note that different databases have different procedures to face this issue or to address this issue. As we would really call for all stakeholders, and they all need to be aware of this serious issue and need to act on it. And lastly, I do notice I seem to be a bit over time, but really last, I would like to emphasize addressing this important issue needs everybody to work on it. And it is important to note that, it is, I think the first recommendation would really be for researchers to consider to select the right journal to publish. And important to note that publishing your work in a suspicious journal may have a severe negative impact for your research career. And certainly the publication malpractice itself should be avoided. And then for identifying a journal, there are several steps you may consider before making a decision. And these are actually listed in the Think, Check, Submit website, which is it's a non-Elsevier website, but it really offers you good resources to consider before you submit your title. For example, when you make your choice and ask yourself, is this journal the right fit for your work? Is it publishing similar content with your work? Would your publication in this journal reach the right peers? the right audience, or is it indexed in the world recognized database like Scopus, Medline, or other databases, or who are working for this journal and can they be trusted? And I think if all the answer might be yes, and then yes, please go ahead. But if there are suspicions around those questions, and then you may have your own judgment on what to do next. All right, Johan, I think that is the end of my presentation. I hope I didn't overtime that much. So I will hand the mic back to you.
Okay, thank you, Tracy, for very thorough explanations. We have, I don't even know how many questions in the Q&A, but thank you so much. So we will start our Q&A. Yeah, I think we can start first with some questions already asked by our participants when they registered using in Zoom. Yeah. And for all participants, we also have Sanders. Hi, Sanders.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Sanders. So Sanders is our customer consultant for Scopus. So both Tracy and Sanders will be answering all of your questions. Yeah. Okay. So let's start first with questions already asked by our registered participants. Let me share my screen. I already prepared some, and let's start with this. Yeah. Okay. So the first questions, this is, I think, for Tracy. Yep. So the question is, do QS and Times Higher Education take into account articles from the discontinued sources for the rankings?
Thanks, Johan, for the ask. I personally don't work specifically on this collaboration with QS and THE on Scopus data, but I do know that definitely for THE, they do exclude the content published in the discontinued titles. But for QS, and to be honest, I don't have an exact answer, and possibly Sander would help a bit on this.
Oh, yeah, okay. I did actually work in a team that works with QS and Times Higher Education at Elsevier, and you're right. So Times Higher Education has made a choice to not include the discontinued journals that in Scopus, so the journals which have been discontinued from Scopus. All of the papers in those journals are not included in the Times Higher Education exercise. We work very closely with Times Higher Education to provide them data and metrics for their exercise. It's a little bit different than how we work with QS. QS, we provide the raw data. So we give them the Scopus custom data, which is the full XML data set representing all of the content in Scopus. They work much more independently. So they're a little bit more doing it their own way, and we have less insight into the exact details of how they calculate everything. So they're also doing their own profiling and citation linking and so forth. I have not heard them mention ever excluding titles which were discontinued from Scopus. So I assume that they are included in QS, but not included in Times Higher Education.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Sanders. Okay. Another question. Yeah. Okay. This one. Why does Scopus keep the papers of discontinued journals indexed instead of removing them? Maybe we can start with you, Sander.
Okay, sure. I get this question quite often, and I think it's a good one. So yes, we do continually monitor journals based on those factors that Tracy talked about, right? And it's based on changes in performance as well as let's say, questions about ethical behavior. So we do discontinue journals for various reasons. The fact is that journals change behavior over time. So all of the journals that were in Scopus at some point in time, they met the criteria for being in Scopus. They were very carefully evaluated by the Content Selection Advisory Board and accepted. Now, most of the journals that are accepted into Scopus, they improve and they thrive. With some minority of journals, they may stagnate, they may decline in quality. And an even smaller subset of those might adopt funny practices. They may change publisher. They might be purchased by a different group who use the journal to prey on the needs of researchers to publish, right? So our job is to detect the point in which either the quality changes or the behavior changes. And we choose to stop indexing from that point forward, but to keep the older content in Scopus. And we believe older content has a place in Scopus in most cases, because again, the journal did meet the criteria for the period that it was indexed. It changed. We don't want it to, right? Things are dynamic and changing over time, and that makes it incredibly complex. So we want to give stability as well. If we keep removing papers and journals from Scopus, that means that people's author profiles will change over time and that the metrics will change over time. Also, Scopus can serve as a kind of record to see what has happened over time. So we see value in that. And I think, as Tracy mentioned, in extreme cases, we can make the choice to remove content from Scopus and do that sometimes. So in the case in which we see that articles were truly fraudulent, they were not actually genuine peer-reviewed science, right? It's not a quality issue, it's actually fraudulent, then we can remove them. So that's a tool we do have. But if we're not so concerned about it actually being science, right, it's more of a quality issue, then we prefer to keep the older content in, stop forward indexing. But the important part is this monitoring process. We quickly identify where the change is taking place, right? Stop indexing the forward content.
Okay, so just to be clear, because I think this is a question that a lot of people also ask in the Q&A, we still keep the articles, yeah, but we don't index the journals forward, right? But there are some instances, extreme case in which we have to eliminate, we have to delete the older content.
Yeah, exactly, Johan. And also, I believe Sander has explained or has answered this quite comprehensively. Like also some of the part also addressed in my presentation, like, we are keeping the records for, scientific records, and these content are already in Scopus and into the personal profiles or affiliation as profiles. And there is a need or value of maintaining those profiles or records. And then what I also recommend is for everybody to also to look at what our CSAB is looking at this issue. I've also include part of the code in it. Actually, there are further in it. This is a complex issue, and we see the need of either including the important or the valuable records in, but also there are other aspects like for very severe cases, we will remove the content. And for severe cases like the content hijacking, whenever we know that the content index is not from a genuine journal, it's from a hijacked party or something, which might be tricky actually. But then once we know it, we have that confirmed, we will remove the content totally. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for a very comprehensive answer from both of you. Next questions. So many journals indicate their coverage year up to year 2020. Is this an indication that the journal is under investigation or to be discontinued after 2020? Maybe Tracy?
Yeah, I can start, Johan. Thanks for the ask. And it's a very good chance to explain the details or get these questions clarified here to a big audience. And thanks for the opportunity. So first of all, for the Scopus or for the journal profile, it's a profile or of a very, it's a sort of a, it's a still one. It's not that dynamic. And basically, currently we have twice updates every year. And there can be a sort of a, gap on the actual dynamic of journals and the status and the content or the content we source. And another important thing to note is that Scopus is updating its data on a daily basis. but it's not meaning that every journal is updating its content on a daily basis to Scopus. And there are certain gaps or certain time lags that the journal publish their content and then its content will be loaded to Scopus. And that varies from publisher to publisher, and thinking about Scopus covers more than 7,000 publishers. And there can be journals that really not even publish their 2020 or 2021 publications. So there are chances that these are still genuine journals, but lacking some of the content. It might not be the really that these journals are under investigation or discontinued. So for every journal, if you have suspicions on this, I would suggest really you to look at the journal homepage and to look at the most updated discontinued sources list from us, because, as I said, that's updated monthly, but our Scopus profile source profile is updated only twice a year, right? There's a gap in it, and check really whether that journal is the one you want to trust, you want to have your work published, and then make your own judgment out of it. But it's really better to get some clarifications around the some of the misunderstanding around this topic. Yeah, Sander?
I could add something to that. Yeah, thank
Yes,
you,
please.
Tracy, because we also get this question quite often, and it's a good one. But in a nutshell, no. So if it says 2020, it does not mean that it's discontinued or that it's flagged. If it says 2020 in Scopus, that just means that the last articles that were loaded into Scopus are 2020. Sometimes the 2021 data is just a little bit late being delivered to us. The best and actually only place to look at the status, right? The current status of the journal is the title list, right? So you can download that from sources in scopus.com. You could also find it on the internet. It's called the Scopus title list. It's updated every month. You can see which are the active titles and which are the discontinued titles. We cannot tell you which journals are flagged for investigation. So that's another question that comes up very often is, why can't you tell us which ones are being investigated so that we don't publish in them? The reason for this is because many journals get flagged, and about 50% of them are discontinued. 50% of them are not discontinued because despite there being factors to warrant reevaluation, the decision is made that they are actually good journals that deserve a place in Scopus. If we were to indicate which journals are flagged, everyone would stop publishing in those journals, and it would become a self-fulfilling prophecy where, because it gets flagged, the quality changes and it gets discontinued. So you understand that being flagged is very confidential. We can only share the information after the outcome. And I think that another question maybe that's in the list of questions to come is how can researchers avoid to publish in a journal that might be likely to be discontinued in future? So that I think that's something we'll discuss a little bit later in the session.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, another question. Yeah. So does predatory journal affect Scopus more than other database, for example, Web of Science?
Shall I start with this?
Yes, please, Sander.
Okay, it's another great question. I think, as Tracy pointed out, it's something predatory publishing affects all of us, and it affects every database. So whether it's a curated database or it's a database that includes everything, all of the databases are affected by predatory publishing. Scopus is a overall more comprehensive database than Web of Science. So I think the overview that Tracy showed is that if you look at the three main databases of Web of Science, so the expanded science database, social science database, and arts and humanities database, or I think they call them indexes, collections. We cover about 99% of the journals there. And of ESCI, so the Emerging Citation Index, we cover, I think, a little bit less than half, and the other half we're not, we're evaluating, but a lot of those we're rejecting because they don't meet our quality standards, right? So there's a different selection process happening, resulting in a slightly different selection of journals, but with a lot of overlap, right? There's a lot of overlap. Overall, Scopus is more comprehensive. And we saw that we remove journals, right, discontinue them for multiple reasons. Sometimes it's performance, and sometimes it's ethical concerns like predatory publishing. Now, if you take all those reasons together in the last 5 or 6 years, correct me if I'm wrong, Tracy, we discontinued around 500 something journals, between 500 and 600. Yeah. Right? So we reevaluated between 900 and 1,000, and we discontinued between 500 and 600, so 50 something percent. A number of those journals that we discontinued are still in Web of Science, right? So they're still either in the core collection or in so it shows that it's complex. There's different methods being used by different indexes, but all of us have this issue and decision to make, like which journal do we include, which ones do we exclude. Sometimes we exclude certain ones that stay in Web of Science. Sometimes they exclude certain ones which we keep in Scopus. Sometimes people say, hey, Jeffrey Beal might say, I really think that this journal is predatory, right? It's on Beal's list. We took all of those journals that are on Beal's list and reevaluated all of them, and we excluded 65%, I think, of them. But 35% of those journals we kept in Scopus because the CSAB came to a different conclusion than Jeffrey Beal. Our evaluation was more comprehensive than the method that he did. We believe ours is the responsible way to do. So does it happen more in Scopus? Maybe the number of journals that we have is more, so maybe we're also discontinuing a higher number. But I think in terms of percentage, very similar trends. It's similar things. So it's the point is we think it's really everyone's problem, and it's a big challenge, and but we take it very seriously. So again, this process is ongoing. Tracy, do you have anything to add? I'm getting myself into trouble here.
Not really, Sandra. You understand is 100% correct, and I do believe that this is an issue not only us or Web of Science or abstract indexing database needs to face and needs to combat, but also the whole research community needs to do that, right? Your research needs to rely on the trusted data and high quality data. And for those predatory, I think, as I said, it starts with the researchers needs to select the right journal, and naturally those predatory journals will attract less and less papers, and that that will really do good to the publishing or the research community as a whole. And also universities, research offices, or even nations are playing a key role in it. So basically, it's a common issue facing everyone. Like, I would say an untypical example would be like, criminals or something, out there is facing us, and we need to tackle that using certain mechanisms. And so it's out there. It's not only Scopus problem for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you both. Okay, so we now move to Q&A from the Q&A box. Yeah, we still have 98 and more questions that we cannot possibly answer every questions, but let me pick some that I believe it's going to be interesting to discuss. So one question, this is about Scimago. Yeah, so the information in Scimago somehow is different than information in Scopus. Yeah, so the question is, how should we anticipate these differences?
Yeah. Shall I go ahead and explain a bit further? Yeah. So Scimago works with Scopus, and their journal rankings is based on the Scopus data, that's for sure. But kindly note that it's based on once per year. It's like a snapshot of once per year Scopus data, and they take the data out there and make the calculations and algorithms and place them on Scimago website. So we have close relationships or collaborations with Scimago, but unfortunately, some of the informations we've done, especially for the discontinuing of journals, is not timely, cannot be timely reflected on the Scimago website. But we do notice at least one issue we want to address for this year is that previously, I think starting last year or even a year before, is that the size score is no longer be given to the titles already discontinued. And for Scimago, it's even that we started doing this reevaluation on many titles since 2016, 2017 time. Scimago didn't sort of exclude those discontinued titles from their source list. And after some discussions and collaborations, I think starting this year, we do hope that they will no longer give the Scimago journal rankings or numbers to those discontinued. But still, bear in mind that our discontinuation is ongoing, so journal can be discontinued at any certain point. But again, that might not be easily reflected on Scimago journal website.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Tracy. Yep. Okay, so move to the next question. This is we're moving a bit to Scopus ID. Yeah. So the question is, this is in Bahasa, so I'll try to translate. So if let's say I had a Scopus ID, and then suddenly I got the journal in which I published get discontinued, what will happen to my Scopus ID?
I think in the normal situation, nothing will happen because the paper will stay in Scopus, right? So if the paper was already published and the journal becomes discontinued, the typical scenario is that the content stays in Scopus. Right, so nothing would happen to the Scopus ID. If it turned out it was one of the very minority journals where content has to be retracted, then, and if that was the only paper that the author had, right, then the ID would not show up in Scopus anymore until that author publishes a paper that gets indexed in Scopus again.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Other questions? Okay, we kind of have like a rapid fire questions answer.
Sure, yeah.
Because we still have 104. So
all right, but let's not waste time then.
We are in 3 days. So another question is, how can I report, for instance, like fake journal website?
That's a very good point. You always have our help desk to report that, but another report or another portal that actually our team is directly responsible for is called the reevaluation@scopus.com. So, and our the title selection team actually working on the same topic will monitor that mailbox. And but while you report to us, please do provide some solid evidence that you find, that journal is already indexed, but the publication behavior is definitely doesn't look good or right, and there are certain reasons that you consider it's either fraudulent or perform publication malpractice on it.
Okay, so we do have like a dedicated team that can help with this. Okay, thank you for that information, Tracy. So
I think that Johan and I also welcome people who we speak to, right? So the many conversations that Johan and I have in Indonesia, if you have concerns about a journal, feel free to discuss them with us as well, right? We'll try to understand what your concern is and we can pass it on to the Scopus team. So whatever you prefer.
Thank you, Sanders. Okay, the next one, how can we get information about CSAB members? Do we have like a website or any portal that can help to understand who are CSAB members?
Yeah, we have a dedicated CSAB website for that, and that is on elsevier.com Scopus page. It's not directly related to Scopus.com platform, I guess, but some information must be available also on the help desk via the Scopus.com. Sander, any additions to that?
I can actually show the page right
That's
now,
great.
quickly.
Okay.
Right, so I just did a quick search for Scopus CSAB, and we have a lot of information and even videos, and you can see who all the members are for each subject area, right? So you can see here, Jorg, computer science, see Professor Henry, social sciences, based in Singapore. You can see each member here, who they are, and read about them, and read also just about the details of how it works, and that's all there. Just a quick Google search for Scopus and CSAB will find you this page very quickly.
Okay, thank you for that, Sanders. Okay, the next one, is it possible to republish paper that have been published in a predatory journal?
Unfortunately not.
Unfortunately.
Once a paper is published, it cannot be republished. That's the...
But Sander, I would say it's not a very simple answer I would prefer, because it also depends on what kind of copyright license or agreement you had with that publisher. And some of the potential predatory publishers may not have a very legitimate or very, how to say, standardized procedures on that. And you need to be very careful on what you offer, and especially the copyright of your work to that publisher.
Okay.
Good nuance that I know, but be careful. Usually, when you publish, you are foregoing the rights to publish elsewhere. But you're right that if the journal that you published with was in and of itself not legitimate, right, and maybe the agreements are not legitimate either, then maybe a different journal would be comfortable to publish that paper still. But I think still that's not a reason to not be super careful to not publish in what we call bad journals, right? Like doing funny stuff. Because
exactly. Exactly. And once it is got published and you've offered your copyright or transferred it to the publisher, whenever it published, it's basically no other journals would accept it for republication. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So next question, who is responsible to put my paper into Scopus database? So once I publish it, who's actually going to put the paper in my Scopus ID, for instance?
That's a great one. So the journal, so you will send your manuscript to a journal, which is indexed in Scopus. They will do the peer review and tell you if you're accepted. If it's accepted, the journal will prepare the digital copy of the paper and publish it, for example, on their website. And there's typically a data feed that sends the metadata of the volume and issue to Scopus, and Scopus processes this, and it goes through a data enrichment pipeline, which we call it. And the data enrichment is for every paper that goes through this data enrichment pipeline. It identifies who are the authors, which institutions are there, so that every paper becomes associated to the author IDs of the authors of the paper and to the affiliation IDs of the affiliated institutions. And this is an automatic process. So once the paper is automatically delivered by the journal to Scopus, and again, that's typically just a process that's ongoing, then it goes through there and happens automatically. So the part that could go wrong sometimes is if a journal, something goes wrong and their data stops being sent to Scopus, then you get what you see where people say, hey, it looks like this journal stopped in 2020. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they stopped. It means that the content stopped arriving at Scopus for a while. And sometimes we need to call the journal because it's as you've seen, it's 25,000 different journals. Sometimes we need to give them a call and say, hey, we're not receiving your content anymore. And it could just be like a technical thing that changed and stopped flowing.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. Okay. So next one, I think this is from a journal editor, Tracy. So I think this is for you. So why some journals, they could be evaluated for a short time, let's say less than 2 months, while some may take like 6 months, a year. So what would make this situation happen?
Yeah, that's a good one, actually. And that's not directly related to the discontinue or the reevaluation procedure, but I guess it's more on the title selection procedure, which is, so basically, or previously, I think due to some of the capacity issue and also the pipelines we are gaining from the title suggestion, there are a lot of journals submitting to us, and the normal turnaround time for journals from submission to accepted is around 6 months to 1 year or even beyond. And there can be various reasons. One is that, yes, as I said, due to some of the capacity issues, but there can also be reasons that the communications between the title evaluation team and the journal became a bit problematic. Like, they didn't receive each other's email, or those emails go to the junk box, and that really can happen. Or even the journals are not aware what the title evaluation team is asking for. So that happens, and that really makes some of the evaluation procedure lengthy. And it also actually depends on the capacity of our subject chairs. As subject chairs, they are not elsewhere staff. They are the experts in different universities, affiliate institutions, right? And they have their own schedule. And sometimes they also need to prioritize a bit on the work or on the titles that needs to be evaluated. But while I would also hope to notify, or I think it's a good chance to notify here, that our team is, and also together with our subject chairs, is working hard to shorten that turnaround time, hoping to pressing that time to about 3 months to 6 months, sort of at maximum. And for those journals already submit your evaluation proposals to us, I would encourage you to monitor the title suggestion checkers to have the most up-to-date evaluation status for your title. Because sometimes it also happens that we already notify the journals you got accepted or not accepted for inclusion, but then the editorial office just failed to receive the email. So that can be a pity.
Yep. Okay. Thank you for explanation, Tracy. Okay, so let me share again, because I think we can only cover 2 more questions because we do have limited time. So let me share again questions from participants that we already prepared. So, okay, the last 2. The first one is this. So, what are the warning signs that a journal or publisher is deemed as predatory? To overcome this issue, what is the action or planning that has been taken to educate researchers or academics at the university?
Yeah, I have a dedicated slides to it. Shall I share it? And then, so let me share my slides first. So this is the one. This is the one. So there are some common flags or red flags for the journals that might be predatory, or and especially this is based on the consensus definitions I also shared, during the presentation. Like there can be false or misleading information with the journal, like fake impact factor. So impact factor basically, or mostly understand that as from the Clarivate journal citation report, right? But there can be other databases or journals using different definitions for it too, and be a bit alerted to the very high numbers they listed on their journal. Or there can be incorrect addresses or misrepresentations of the editorial board. I did hear from our subject chairs during their evaluation or re-evaluation, and that they, validate a bit on the editorial office addresses and see if that journal really exists or something. And then there can be false claims of indexing or membership of the association, like there can be journals claiming that it's indexed in Scopus already, but actually it's not. So I would also encourage you to validate a bit on that. And then a second category is deviation from the best editorial and publication practices. And especially use your common sense. Like when you look at a website, it doesn't look professional, for example, with very obvious spelling or grammar mistakes or irrelevant text. That also happens. Like, the journal aim scope is totally different even from the journal title. And that is definitely a red flag. And then the lack of transparency. So it means little or no information of how editorial decisions are made. what type of peer review they are using, and that is why Scopus, during title selection, we are also checking those announcements around the publication ethics, around the licensing, the agreement, how the journal should be accessed. Is it open access, or it is open access? Would the article processing charges are clearly indicated for the authors? And then some other informations like even those editors, they needs to be easy to find, and they needs to be a really valid person on that. So these are some informations you may consider. And then lastly, about aggressive indiscriminate solicitation, like repeated emails and excessively flattering in tone. And a clear warning signs is that, the email inviting you to submit your manuscript to that journal is actually your expertise is not in line with that journal scope. So these are really some common red flags that a journal or a predatory journal will use. And lastly, I would also encourage that we are following, or we are using the COPS, so COP, that's Committee of the Publishing Ethics, best practices and transparency on the scholarly publishing. And I would encourage the audience to read that further. It's not that hard, and you can easily understand what can be called the transparency and best practices of the international scholarly publishing. And if journals are not applying to that, be a bit alert to the behaviors. But certainly there are certain things for local journals, and you also have to take a comprehensive view on every aspect and make your fair judgment. And for university side or for other things, Sander, you want to comment?
I think you covered most of it. There's certainly a lot of sometimes third parties, and sometimes it's a journal itself, and sometimes it's a third party that might contact a university and promise them that if they pay a certain amount of money, they can guarantee publications in a journal that's indexed in Scopus or Web of Science. And that should always be looked at very carefully, because such promises saying it's guaranteed acceptance, that doesn't sound very responsible, right? There's money involved up front, it's not like just an article processing fee, but it's money for a service. That's very dodgy, right? From a journal side, you have all the things that Tracy said. Some journals are really promising, right? Saying, "Oh, we really want to publish your article," and you should think, "Well, hey, you didn't even see my article yet," or "Hey, your journal seems to be in a field that's not related to mine." And if it's got flashing banners on the website that says Scopus, Web of Science, I would take this all as danger science. Really do your homework and think twice. It looks too good to be true. Usually it's not true. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Sanders. Yeah. Well, maybe you can show me, and if you have an example of the flashy website.
Yeah. I don't know one off the top of my head, but they're not that hard to find, sadly.
Okay. But that's quite interesting, because I never seen such flashy banner, but that would be
well. They go out of their way to show that it's Scopus indexed or Web of Science indexed, right? They make that like almost as big as the title of the journal, and I think that most very good journals they base the website on the quality of and content of what they're doing, and not on our name or Web of Science, right? So yeah.
Okay. So last questions. I know that we still have, let me see, 131 questions, in which we cannot answer everything. So for participants, we are sorry for the limited time. Because of limited time, we cannot answer all of your questions. But we still have time for one more. And the last question, what can researchers do to avoid publishing in bad journals? So what sort of skills, what sort of knowledge, or maybe tools that they can rely on so they would not publish in these bad journals?
I think Tracy and I were talking about this yesterday, weren't we? In an email. There's a couple of resources that you could use, but each one has its own kind of methodology. So I think it's what we call due diligence, to look carefully at when you target a journal, is it really the right journal for you? Maybe not only targeting because you think, I think they will accept me, so I should target that journal. That's always a little bit dangerous. I mean, look at the journal. Is it really a good fit? Do all the checks on whether it's legitimate, right? So check that the version that you're looking at is the version that's in Scopus, because sometimes you have journal hijackings, for example, where a journal copies the exact same name of a journal that's in Scopus, but actually you're submitting to the version that maybe is not in Scopus, for example. So I guess it's doing homework. Also, I would say aiming a little bit higher could help if it's possible, right? So I give a lot of advice in terms of looking at analysis of universities. And we find that universities which publish less in quartile 4 and more in the higher quartile journals report less problems with this, while universities that say publish half of their content or 60% of their content in quartile 4 tend to also be the ones who report, hey, we're having trouble in terms of it turns out that we publish in some problematic journals. But I think we need to, the driver is the pressure to make numbers because of KPOs and stuff, right? So that's there, but at the same time, you will hurt your own performance if you publish in journals which aren't what they seem. Tracy, do you have comments on where they can do their homework and kind of what places they should look, tools?
Well, I would say there are several common tools that we already recommended, like Think, Check, Submit, or even elsewhere. The company, we publish already a loads of journals, and there are very good resources on training the authors or researchers on where to publish and what is the methodology behind the whole journal publishing business or industry. So get equipped with those information. That will definitely help you to verify the journal from good to bad, I would say. And another thing to note is that even I would totally agree with Sander that really targeting on the top journals that will make yourself less risky to the discontinue or to the bad journals. And then even that not everybody can publish in, say, Nature, Cell, or Science, that's for sure, right? But there are still loads of other genuine journals in different tiers or categories. And not only make your judgment, I think a very good advice would be not only make your judgment based on single matrix. And you have to look comprehensively at the journal performance, like what is the aim and scope? And there can be journals that stating very specifically what kind of work they are going to publish. And some of them are quite niche, but some of them might be broad. But still with the broad, you can see a bit from their editors, board members, the publications themselves, like, are there similar works to my work? And that is the venue you want to publish your work, because your peers and your the people working in similar areas for you will read those content. And that's actually how you can improve your impact or improve how your work will reach the right audience. And that's the right way to select your journal. And I think by doing those due diligence, then you will be hopefully immune to the predatory journals.
Okay, thank you so much, Sander. Thank you so much, Tracy. For everyone, we as a researchers, we need to take notes, serious notes, that when we already put a lot of hard work into creating our research, we don't want to just for the sake of publish it regardless of the quality of the journals. So we need to have our own homework to search, to research for the journals that we believe would be right for us. And thank you so much for the explanations. I think it really equips a lot of researchers joining us today, to have this understanding that it's that they have to work to find the right publishers, to avoid publishing in this so-called bad journals. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, Tracy. Thank you so much, Sander. Yeah, and for all the participants, again, we are sorry we cannot answer more questions coming from all of you, but really hope that this provides a lot of insight, yeah, for everyone in Indonesia. Indonesia, as Tracy mentioned, I think it's the it's the fact that right now we are a country in Southeast Asia with the highest numbers of publication, but we do have homework. So even though we have the most published articles in Southeast Asia, but the quality is not there yet. So our job together as Indonesia's researchers is to increase quality. So hopefully from this session, that homework is we can do this together as a country to increase the quality of our publication. So thank you so much, Tracy. Thank you so much, Sander. So for
thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
For all other participants, Tracy and Sanders, will thank you again. But for all the participants, I'm going to share with you a post-event survey. So thank you for joining. And we would like to ask you to answer the following post-event survey to know your feedback. So your feedback for our event. So you can scan the QR code, or you can see in the chat box, I think one of my colleague already posted the link, for you to be able to answer the post-event survey. If you have trouble right now in finding the links, or scanning the QR code, we will also be sending the link to your email. So your email, we will be sending the email right after this session. I think my colleague already put the link into the chat. So you can either go from there, or you can scan the QR code, or you can do this much later. Okay. Thank you. Now the last part. So again, you don't have to do this now. If possible, you can try to open it. Leave it first, and then you can do it a bit later. And last but not least, I know that a lot of participants also asked about certificate. So we will show you how you can download your certificate for this event. Okay. So to claim your certificate, we have a platform or application, and you can claim you can download your certificate by yourself. So let me just go through how you can do this. So first, you need to go to this link, or you can scan the QR code. So again, you need to go to this link or scan the QR code as you see on your screen. Okay, and then after that, you will need to answer short questions. I think only 5 or 6 questions. So answer the questions, and once you answer the questions, you will be asked to put workshop code. So this page will show up right here. And then you need to put the workshop code, and this is the workshop code. And then after that, if you already have Elsevier ID, for instance, maybe you already have Science Direct ID or Scopus, you will be able to download your certificate right away. However, if you have not create any Elsevier ID, you will be prompted to do so. So after you put this workshop code, you will be prompted to register first so that we can generate the certificate for you. Maybe this is a bit complex for some of you. So let me explain this once again in Bahasa Indonesia. Jadi Bapak Ibu, untuk klaim sertifikatnya, Bapak Ibu perlu menuju ke link ini dulu, atau bisa juga scan QR code-nya. Lalu nanti akan ada 5-6 pertanyaan, silakan dijawab. Kalau sudah dijawab, nanti Bapak Ibu masukkan workshop code. Jadi nanti akan diminta workshop code-nya. Silakan dimasukkan, ini workshop code-nya. Oke, nah kalau Bapak Ibu sudah punya Elsevier ID, secara otomatis langsung Bapak Ibu bisa download sertifikatnya. Tapi kalau belum punya, Bapak Ibu harus register terlebih dahulu. Registernya boleh pakai email institusi, boleh pakai email personal. Nah setelah sudah register, baru Bapak Ibu bisa download sertifikatnya. Kenapa harus register? Karena ketika Bapak Ibu register akan ada first name dan last name. Nah, itu yang kita butuhkan untuk bisa menciptakan, ya, menghasilkan sertifikat untuk Bapak Ibu. Ya, oke. So that's how you can claim your certificate. Again, you can do this a bit later as well. Yeah. So if you have problem with your internet right now, it's still okay. Yeah, we will share this information to all of you. Yeah. So right after this webinar, we will share the materials, yeah, or the slide, and also the recording, and how you can download the post-event survey, and also how you can download your certificate. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Once again, thank you so much, Tracy. Thank you so much, Sander, and for all participants from across all over Indonesia. Yeah, I believe that this webinar already provide a lot of insights, yeah, and understanding about how Scopus works, and especially avoiding predatory journals. Yeah. Okay, thank you everyone, and of course, this is not the only webinars that we are going do this year. Yeah, so there will be more webinars from Elsevier, yeah, more workshops maybe with the different topics, and we'll see you on this other webinars. So thank you, good afternoon, and stay safe and healthy, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye then.
Bye. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Johan. Bye.
you